Pedram Shojai, welcome to the Biohacking Secret Show.
Great to be here.
So I was mentioning right before we hit record, I was a few years ago a member of something called Mentor Box, where like every month they'd send you a book that they really enjoyed along with like a summary of it, and then this jump drive with like some behind the scenes expert interviews, and they sent me your book, The Urban Monk, and that was kind of how you came onto my radar. So I'm pretty pumped because we're going to be talking about a lot of cool things that you teach, like inner alchemy, turning awareness around, your longevity formula, overcoming overwhelm, finding meaning, and a bunch of cool stuff like that. But maybe before we get into all that fun stuff, you can give our listeners who might not be familiar with your work a little bit of background and like your origin story, if you will.
Yeah, how I got into this mess, huh? The origin story is scrappy immigrant kid, escaped a revolution in Iran, came over here, and my generation, what do you do? Doctor, lawyer, engineer, right? And so did well in high school, went straight to UCLA to be a doctor, and then started working with doctors and realized how miserable of a bunch they were, at the time where I was at. So, I had my angels kind of drive my perspective of, kind of what that industry was about. There were some really kind of depressing data points where, I was doing pain management and, morphine is kind of all we had. And things have changed dramatically. And, I'm actually really excited about medicine again. But at the time it was like, we're just dripping these dudes on morphine. This isn't that cool. Right. And so,
or opiates.
Yeah, that's it. It's like it was all just, it was opiate city. And, aside from that, they do some selected nerve blocks and wheel grandma out in a wheelchair. And, she'd come back for her next appointment and, zombies do exist. Right. And so it wasn't that inspiring. Same time, I'm taking my first Tai Chi class and like seeing, with my own eyes, like, this is stuff. It feels great. But got confused about future trajectory, asked God for a clue, and a book fell out of a bookshelf, which isn't supposed to happen. So I read it and found a Daoist master the next week, went in there and he's like, hey, I've been expecting you. And I'm like, man, this stuff's, I don't even know what I'm doing here.
Do you say that to everyone, Daoist master?
Daoist master, yeah, exactly. Is that part of your funnel, right? It was just this really creepy kind of like coincidence of all things. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I belong here. Became the senior student of Daoist abbot, Kung Fu, Qigong, Tai Chi for decades. Became a doctor of Oriental medicine. Loved the art. Hate the business. You're kind of relegated to being kind of second tier to these arrogant pricks that think they know everything. And so started my own medical group and realized medicine kind of sucks. The business of medicine, I got to wait till someone breaks before Blue Cross pays me for it. This was early 2000s, and said, look, this model isn't what I learned to do. Right, I'm trying to prevent the tragedies, not wait for them to start happening, and then manage the cases, right? This is insane. So got into corporate wellness, started, consulting about 1,400 companies, making some really big impact. But if you've ever been around corporate, it's just like yawn. You're just dealing with a lot of structure and folks that aren't happy and you're trying to help them. And then I realized I was repeating myself a lot. So started recording it. Did my first book in 2009. First film in 2000 came out in 2012. Now I'm like, I don't know, dozens of films and documentary series into the film career, and I think 8 books into my writing career. And I don't know, just a dude that talks a lot, I guess. But it's been a really interesting trajectory to just keep iterating and changing what I'm about to take on bigger problems, right? And so you want to tackle health, you have to tackle public health. You want to tackle, consciousness, you have to get into media and understand that people are being, misfed and misled. Right? Mm-hmm. And so here I am. Now I'm a media guy. Who knew?
Cool. I mean, I'm fascinated by that too, because I know a lot of people who feel like a lot of the content that they want to put out, whether it's like documentaries or docuseries and things like that, they're like, oh, well, I'll never get a Netflix deal with this because they don't want this information out there. And like they're, in many ways, steering consciousness in what could be considered an unproductive direction or a non-expansive direction, So before we kind of get into a lot of your teachings, like how do you now handle like your creative process? And then how do you also navigate like the distribution side where you're like, I have to imagine some of the stuff that you want to share. You're like, I want to share this, but it's not going to get picked up by these places. You know what I mean? How do you kind of navigate those two things?
Yeah. First stop is don't care about who picks it up. Be your own distribution. Then it doesn't matter. Right. Yeah. I put one of my films on Netflix, but it was kind of like a side after I had already shared it with millions of people online and done a free screening model and gotten people into, our ecosystem. And so, now I own our own streaming platform called bepossible.com. And, I put up what I feel like putting up, and I don't have to ask dad for permission. Right. And so that's really it is, Netflix is struggling, right? They'll go pay Scorsese $100 million to watch a movie. Maybe, one out of 10,000 of their viewers will watch once, right?
I couldn't even get through it. The Irishman, right. Couldn't even get through it.
Right. And that's it. And so like, then it's just like, boo, what next? And so they're just throwing all this money at like begging people to stick around. Mm-hmm. I have a very different model where I'm like, hey, let's help you with your headaches. Let's help you with your hormonal problems. And let's, you are supremely interested in what, I'm talking to you about because you came here through that channel. So we're just really good at understanding the pain points of people and then putting best in class experts in front of them to help them be empowered, be educated, and then take action to actually move from passive to active and do things for themselves that make them better. The second part of your question is, I'm still very involved. Like I just got off of, my top producer was 30 years HBO, A&E, he's been, he's a guy from the industry. We have a roll-up meeting every week. We talked about 7 projects that we're filming right now. Hey, how about this? How's this? This producer might be lagging here. And then the ones that I am innately interested in, I jump in with creative input. If it's somebody I've been dying to meet, I'll jump on a bird and be there for the interview. You know what I mean? And just be actively involved. But, there's just too much filming and too many projects happening for me to, interject myself. I've realized I'm not that useful when it comes to the mechanics of it, but I am very useful in identifying human suffering and helping, match problems with solutions. And I enjoy it. So, I don't want to be a suit, I want to be involved. I want to be involved in the stuff that's meaningful in our company.
Sweet. And then let's talk about bepossible.com. Because we just had another video that was banned on YouTube that I recorded in 2020 with a physician, and then Instagram today just was like, hey, you're on timeout for 10 days and keep it up and you're going to lose your account. So I've been actively syndicating to a lot more decentralized platforms, and your BitChutes and your Rumbles and your Rockfins and that sort of thing. What was the impetus of creating Be Possible, and what sort of is like your elevator explanation of what differentiates it from what else is out there?
Yeah, it's health and wellness streaming media designed to meet people where they're at. And, what happened is I was doing these documentary series, and, I've been around the block. I've done, 10-part series on the microbiome, 10-part series on female hormones, exhaustion. And so we've tackled a lot of very kind of deep domain, and deep dives into specific domains. It's like if someone's going to sit there and spend 900 minutes looking at this 10-part series, it's because they're frustrated, right? With their doctor, with the system, with the results. Who the hell's got that kind of time unless they're suffering? And so we really understand and identify where the pain points are, and then help them kind of escalate and get out. So my impetus was to, help these people, but then you start throwing, titles up on the wall, and you're like, holy crap, I've got a library now. And so then you go through, so I went to Mark Hyman, I went to Tom O'Brien, I went to a bunch of other friends that had documentary series. It was like, hey, can we license your stuff? Right. And, we're producing them as fast as we can. We're licensing them as fast as we can. And now we have, episodic shows. We have, 600 hours of fitness, yoga, all that stuff. Because the questions start coming in. It's like, okay, what do I do? Or like, go do yoga. And then I send them to the dumpster fire that's YouTube. And, I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know where I'm sitting. Right. You got all these people that are really, there's a lot of commercially interested people. There's a lot of politically interested people. And then there's like creepers and pedophiles, and, the world's full of everything. And they all happen to be on YouTube. Right. And so then we're like, damn, we should probably do our own kind of nutrition stuff. We should curate the yoga. And so as we started kind of understanding what people were needing and asking for, we started creating more and more media to do so. And that and it led to something that was kind of an eventuality. I didn't really want to get back into the care model, but, a huge volume of our customer service tickets were, okay, so do you have a doctor in Kansas you'd recommend? Right. And, originally we'd send them to ifm.org, and that's just, they can only handle as much capacity as they could. So now I have, health coaches and telemedicine layered in, because we realized that we were letting go of the chain of custody, and this person was asking for help. So now, because I know the people I know, and, could make a few phone calls, I have best in class doctors, and everything across, the spectrum of care, to help these folks, or at least triage them to get them to the help that they need. Because at the end of the day, you can say you want to help people, you can do what you do and go home and throw a soccer, kick a soccer ball around with your kids. But, if the end result is not connecting the dots and helping the people that you said you're there to help, you got to try harder. Right. And so, it's plenty of work to do, man.
I dig it. And I feel like that telemedicine, especially from like a functional medicine perspective, is the future. It gets us outside of that framework where doctors are restricted with, 10 or 20 minutes to see patients, which pretty much limits them to recommend pharmaceuticals. And the functional model with telemedicine at least gives these doctors and functionally minded practitioners the opportunity to go deeper and really get to the root cause of what's going on and correct that, and use the proper diagnostic tools to look deeper than just, the surface level. So I think that's fantastic that you're doing that. And that's all available through the letter B and then possible.com.
Yep. And then, you're a biohacking dude, and we're, fully integrated in with Heads Up Health, and, just all the biometric stuff that's juicy, all the lab analysis, all the things that matter. And then, even with that, even with telemedicine, I mean, MD salaries are more expensive. So the end user, ends up paying more. So then, coaching becomes the glue that is the compliance, compliance and behavioral mod is the whole game. Right. And so we found that the integration of coaching with telemedicine, with functional medicine protocols, is really what works best. And at the end of the day, it's like, I'm not here to lecture folks and tell them, hey, go do this stuff and, and scold them for not having done it. I need to make sure that they're going to do what it's going to take to get them out of the calamity they're in. And whether that's, their marriage challenges, their chronic fatigue, or the mold in their house, let's dig it up, man. Let's figure out how to help you, because that's essentially why you're here, right? You came to ask for help. So now, we have to maintain the chain of custody and get you to the right help.
I dig it. What projects that you've done, whether it's books, films, educational series, are you most proud of?
I'm really proud of the Interconnected series, which is really, it kind of blew the door open on the microbiome, and it was really avant-garde. We're doing a part 2 now, another 10-part series on the microbiome. That's how amazing and intricate the science of the kind of gut microbiota genomics world is. There's a lot of progress there. The one that is just coming out soon is Hormones, Health, and Harm. It's just amazing to me how no one, the female consumer has been mansplained their hormonal problems, and basically, been kind of relegated to, being hysterical or whatever the kind of dominant stereotypes have been for decades. And no one has leaned in to say, look, let's go do an entire project on women's hormonal health. And, most of the physicians are females who have stories and all this stuff. And it's just like, I tell people about this and their eyes open up. It's just like, oh my God, finally someone who's helping us, right? Specifically speaking to my gender kind of thing, right? I'm very proud of, the books. Focus, my latest book, I'm very proud of, because it kind of, it's the summation of, years of work, and, dude who used to have hair is, having been around tens of thousands of people in a teaching capacity and, like a, online dude, you get to see what's working and you get to see what's tripping people up. And so the metaphor of the life garden and the plants that you can afford to water and the weeds that you got to pull has helped a lot of people. Right. And to me, I'm not saying anything new. I'm an ancient wisdom guy. I mean, I do have some like new cool technology in a clinic we just opened, but I'm here to help reframe people's operating systems so that they can make better choices and be the person they say they want to be. So let's look at those bad habits. Let's look at the framing in your consciousness that's prohibiting you from taking the steps that you need to take, literally and figuratively, right? Like, why aren't you taking that walk every day?
Right.
What do we got to do to make it happen?
Right. Identifying the limiting beliefs and kind of reframing those and getting people to the core of what needs to happen in order for them to take consistent action and like get those compound benefits. What are your thoughts on the Viome test? We've got 3-day stool tests from companies like Genova and that sort of thing for the microbiome. Like, you've gone so deep on the microbiome. If you could only get, 1 or 2 labs that would provide valuable data points and diagnostics in order to get the gut, straightened out, where would you go?
I think clinically, Genova is very good. Genova does a lot of really good work. There's a couple oral microbiome products that we're looking at right now that I won't quite endorse yet. I really like what Microbiome Labs is doing. They're now part of the Novo family. I have a long history with Viome. Some people love it, some people hate it.
That's kind of the feedback that I get too.
Yeah. And for me, if it's actionable and you take some of these recommendations and they work for you and you're, losing weight, less anxious and all those things, then great. If not, I don't really think, I think, people have a real affection for this kind of new and improved data mining stuff. But unless it's relevant in the life of the person I'm recommending it to, I'm not going to have them waste their money. Right. Mm-hmm. It's people are taking, I could send people for $8,000 worth of tests in a blink of an eye because I want to, say I'm the coolest functional medicine dude in town. I'd say, 6 to 15% of that would be relevant for, this person based on, a good intake. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think the testing is overdone. I think it's incredibly valuable, but I do think people do the kitchen sink testing model just to impress their colleagues or impress their patients or, I don't know what the hell people are doing.
Yeah, for sure. When someone asks you, like, what is inner alchemy? What do you say?
So it's the only game in town. Inner alchemy is the transmutation of your base elements to the gold that is the pure spiritual essence that is you, right? And so I think a lot of people try to run to heaven and people try to, look for answers outside of themselves, where the temple that we've been given is right here, and the workshop is right here, and the breath is right here, and your consciousness is, it's the name of the game. And the understanding that turning the light of awareness around to observe this consciousness and ask, who am I, and who just asked that question? This is the only game in town, and people are, taking NAD drips and, running off to retreats and trying to get into weird yoga poses as much as they can to like find meaning. Mm-hmm. But they are still looking for it outside themselves, right? And so the inner alchemy process, whatever lineage you hail from, is really it. And I think we live in a world that, is predicated on the attention economy, right? So Instagram, wants my attention on that screen because they're monetizing it. And the longer I can, flick through TikTok, videos and stay kind of connected there, the more money that is for somebody. And that currency of my attention, I mean, what is that? That's my energy. That's my heartbeats. Those are my precious moments left here on planet Earth. And I'm, watching, cat videos or whatever the hell it is. Right. And so how do I flip that attention, retrovert it, and bring it back to my own consciousness, to wake up to who I truly am and become truly happy, where the inner nexus of control is internal, right? And that's I used to be almost like a spiritual apologist. Like I was the monk guy, and then I had like my other stuff over here. So hey, I gave a church kind of thing, and I'd have my own personal practice. And over the years, it has become abundantly clear that if you don't have an introspective practice that allows for you to kind of grow from within and emanate and exude that happiness and that peace and that kind of contemplative glow that comes from people who, sat and done this work, then, it's going to impact your decisions for your health. It's going to impact your marriage. It's going to impact your time management. It's going to impact everything. And so, I'm tired of saying, oh yeah, and by the way, you should meditate or pray or whatever. It's a central part to the personal hygiene of a human is their spiritual hygiene, whatever that may be for you. Find something, go get it, right?
Yeah. I interviewed my brother who's on Instagram at The Wave in the Ocean, and we did like a fun conversation where we looked back through our lives and wove in some cool teachings and things like that. And the name of the episode that we went with was trading the looking glass for the mirror. And it was all about going within and realizing that social media and the television and even fear and some of these disempowering emotions, they just take our focus outward and prevent us from not only like looking at ourselves and doing some of that challenging inner work that needs to take place, but it's, like you said, a currency that drains us. And it's easy to go through your whole life focused outward and never even really know who you are and never really know like what are the patterns that are interfering with your goals and dreams and what you want to do, have, be, and embody in your life. So I love that. You mentioned prayer and meditation, and meditation is something that I've been involved with for a long time. And prayer, I got more deeply involved with starting around 2018. And it's been like a complete game changer. One of my friends and clients pointed out, he said, like, it's kind of like you're in a conversation with God, and meditation's like listening and prayer is like talking. And he's like, with you just meditating and like doing yoga, he goes, you're in a really bad conversation. It's a very one-sided conversation. And I was like, all right. And it kind of created a shift. And then I'll tell this story some other time, but not on this episode. But having the integration of those two as a daily practice has been completely life-changing for me, and something that, it's now my intention to constantly deepen my connection with our creator, with God, and of course with myself in doing that. What would you say is like, if there was one or two practices, and it could be prayer and meditation, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, for someone who wants to really develop that inner alchemy and start turning their awareness around, what are like the key practices and specifically the protocols? Like there's a difference between meditating for 2 minutes and meditating for 30 minutes twice a day, right? Like what are your recommendations there for our listeners?
Sure. I'll preface my answer by saying, look, there's many ways to climb the mountain, right? So, everyone says my way is the way. I don't have a way, right? Like I've studied Buddhism with the Dalai Lama. I've studied Daoism for my whole career, Kabbalah, Hermetic Christianity. I don't care. I just, I'm a seeker, right? So, if someone is a little too ingrained in their way, careful, because your wallet might be missing next, right? So the second preface there is, I want to challenge the assertion, not that you made, but that's out there in the world, that, okay, I want to like learn how to do yoga, or I got to meditate. So I'm going to go, find a Vipassana retreat and, take 10 days to go off over here, or I got to go do yoga over there. And again, it's that kind of externalized outsourcing of these things, these experiences that happen outside, where, the kind of the premise of, the Urban Monk, which is, the book that you kind of read, being introduced to my work, was, look, there's ascetics and householders in traditional cultures that, where all this stuff spawned from. And, we have all kind of gravitated towards this narrative that, to do yoga or to be spiritual, you do these ascetic practices, which are designed for, less than 1% of the population who, subjugate their desires to this work and, don't have sex, don't have kids, don't touch money, and live up on the mountain. Right. And so if you're a householder, which, like if you've got bills and kids and food and stuff that you got to procure on your own, it's a different deal. And so it becomes incredibly important to understand that you have to find the mindfulness in your day to day. You have to breathe down to your lower abdomen between your calls. You have to turn your house into the temple. Therefore, there's nowhere to go. You're already there. And now we can get into the answer to your question, which is, look, there's tons of techniques. The one I like the most for beginners, if you will, but I still do this one to this day, is, Daoist 4-count breathing or Buddhist 4-count breathing. They're kind of the same, which is sit with your spine straight, bend your knees, and put the tip of the tongue to the roof of the mouth. That's a trifecta to really push the nervous system into parasympathetic dominance. We don't know why it works, but it does. And it turns out these guys have been advocating for this for thousands of years before we had the word parasympathetic in our lexicon. So it works, right? And so those three things: keep your spine straight, bend your knees, tip of the tongue to the roof of the mouth, and we'll start doing lower diaphragmatic breathing, which means about 3 fingers below your navel, as if you have a balloon down there. We inflate that on the inhale, and then we exhale and we deflate that, okay? So that's just the mechanics. It's in and out of the lower abdomen. And then let's add something for the monkey mind to get assigned to, and that's breathing and counting. So inhale for the count of 4, hold for the count of 2, exhale for the count of 4, and hold for the count of 2. You just rinse and repeat. And when, not if, your mind starts to wander, what your average kind of beginner starts to do is get pissed at themselves and say, see, I suck at this. I'm thinking about my bills. I'm thinking about the dog going to the vet. I'm thinking about what my girlfriend said. Bah. See, I'll never be good at this. And what you're not realizing is that, every time I wiggle my toe or breathe in oxygen or just exist here in this body, my body is sending all sorts of neuronal impulses to the brain, all sorts of relays saying, this is up and this is down. And there's going to be thoughts. There's going to be refractory noise. And the challenge is learning to observe and not identify with the noise, and learning that the noise is always there. The Dalai Lama, when I sat with him, he's like, look, I've got thoughts, I've got noise all the time. The key is to increase the depth of the water so that the entire body of water isn't choppy with your reckless thoughts, but to put an entire ocean of serenity on top of that, and just continue to learn the practice of equanimity. What we call in Taoism is inner seeing, inner hearing. And once you realize that your true seeing and your true hearing are capacities that you haven't even tapped into in your humdrum life, then you're getting into your superpower self. Then you're getting into the real game, right? Inner alchemy, again, it's the only game in town.
You'd mentioned subjugating desires. And there's talk in certain Taoist practices about semen retention and a whole bunch of different things. And then you get into, like, there's a movement now where a lot of men are realizing that pornography affects the dopaminergic centers in the brain and our relationships with women and how we view sexuality and the sacred nature thereof. What are some desires that along your journey you had to actively, consciously subjugate in order to evolve?
Yeah. So many. I mean, just, from the top of where you started, the desire to need to ejaculate is, not tied to orgasm. It's not tied to sex. And, to step into Tantra, you really need to understand how to master the sexual energy. I mean, think about it. That's your lifeline to immortality physically, but it's also your lifeline to immortality up your spine, right? And so you want to immortalize your consciousness. It's a pretty good place to start, right? But I mean, you name it, whether it's, sweets after dinner, whether it's, hitting 40 and realizing even a glass or two of wine gives me a headache, gone. And, looking at some lab values and realizing genetically I'm not a great, metabolizer of caffeine, bye-bye coffee, right? And so one at a time, you start looking at the things. How about the things that waste your time? How about, playing, some app on your phone when you're sitting on the toilet, or scrolling through the news feed to see, what the next atrocity in Ukraine is. Depending on where you get hung up, you have to see and identify only for yourself, really, what are the plants, what are the weeds, right? Mm-hmm. And if you come to the rational conclusion that a certain behavior, certain foods, certain tasks, certain toxic person is a weed, then the decision is clear. Now you just have to have enough chi or energy to effectively make the change. And I think that's where, the vitality equation comes in, is most people are too damn tired to make any moves in their lives, right? They're not moving around. They're not eating right. They're not sleeping well. They're borrowing from tomorrow to get through today with multiple, caffeine beverages and all these things. And so their energy economics are so skewed that, even when they know what the right move is, they don't have enough capacity to follow through with it. So, again, that's why I've come full circle back to health. And, I have a clinic opening in Park City next month with, plasmapheresis, NAD,
nice.
zone saunas, everything. Because the medicine has now finally caught up to the promise, and you're like, holy crap, this stuff works. Yeah. And so, literally I have like a, really crazy expensive laser sitting right there that, activates activated PRP and B cells. And, some of the biological age of the subjects we've been looking at is going down on an average of 3 years.
That's pretty gnarly.
Yeah.
Are you doing like Horvath testing?
Horvath is part of it. So some of it is Horvath, some of it is methyl pathways, telomere length. And then, there's also all sorts of functional assays that you can look at too. You start looking at people's biological aging going down. We're scrubbing senescent cells through reverse kind of like dialysis, all sorts of crazy stuff. But okay, so if you're tired, that's fixable. What's next? Right. And so let's figure out what's wrong. Let's bring enough energy to the party and couple it with clarity. Right. Because, I think Wayne Dyer was kind of misinterpreted. It's not all about intention. It's about attention and intention. Right. If I have a bucket of water and I, have a few plants that I want to water, but I just go spray it everywhere, it's gone, right? But if I create a drip feed system and deliver that water in precision to the seeds,
are we still talking about semen retention? We're just messing around.
No, the bucket of water is absolutely relevant in that, right?
Is it?
And the release there. So here's the thing about semen retention that people mess up is you can still release the semen once you understand how to pull the energy up so that you don't release the energy with the semen. But most guys, especially guys that got caught up in porn and all that kind of stuff that, to me are aberrations for, true sensuality and sexuality, is those things are so coupled. And you'll hear it from guys, like, what are you talking about? They're not coming. Like, right? And you're like, all right, buddy, right? So, you're stuck and I don't need to show you this, right? But, but if you ever come around, there's another way, right? And the other way leads to, amazing orgasms for all parties involved. And it leads to rejuvenation and health and vitality versus I need to take a nap or, my coach is mad because I wasn't supposed to do that the night before the game, right? And so there are absolute parallels between, that bucket of water and what we're talking about. But yeah, you want to drip feed your dreams. You don't want to be wasteful with your vitality, right? You want your attention and your intention in lockstep, right?
Yeah, I think if we have time, I'd like to come back to how to not tie your ejaculation to orgasm or orgasm to ejaculation, and go a little bit deeper in there, because that's kind of the next thing that I would like to work on. And honestly, a lot of times I get caught up in the moment and don't do as well as I would like. But it is very important to me to continue to develop that sacred sexuality and go deeper there, rather than, for much of my life, I was kind of the, long and wide, but shallow guy. And like now I'm working on going deeper and exploring that with, fewer people or just one person. Have you looked into pheresis, the Japanese machines that are a plasmapheresis machine? They're supposed to be like next level. And I know a lot of people who have had their lives completely changed. Like I've had Lyme disease twice. I went to a St. George clinic in Bad Aibling, Germany, and I did extreme whole body hyperthermia. They cooked me at like 107 degrees for 2 different sessions over 3 weeks. I was doing the Weber IV laser along with it, ozone, vitamin IVs. And then I didn't do the plasmapheresis just because I had a lot of their stuff going on. But I know a number of people that went through that protocol and then did pheresis in the Bavarian forest. and went from non-functional, like headed towards death, to back working, back, in the game of life. So I was kind of curious if that was something you'd explored, and I'd love to see extreme whole body hyperthermia here if the 3-letter acronyms that kind of control some of our medical system would allow such a thing.
So, again, I threw my hat back in the ring because I was wholly unimpressed until I was re-impressed, right, with what has come forth. And so I can't even disclose what we're going to put in the clinic, but we've done our homework. Oh my God. Like I had the guys that run the labs not sit down with me and be like, dude, we've triple, quadruple checked. This stuff works. And the stuff is working in ways where, aging is optional. There are so many diseases optional. I mean, there's a lot of diseases that we're having a hard time with still, but there are so many pathological processes that we're starting to understand better. And some of the immune therapies are amazing. Obviously the plasmapheresis is amazing. There's just a lot of hope now. Mm-hmm. And there are, if we don't blow each other up and, die for other causes, and there's, good reason to believe that we will, right? There are, a lot of environmental challenges that we're facing, a lot of kind of geopolitical challenges and all that. But, assuming we stay alive, it's a very promising era that we're getting into.
Yeah, I agree. There's, especially like post 2020 with everything that's gone on in the world, there's so many people that are feeling overwhelmed and struggling, just, having awakenings on one level, but also like a dark night of the soul that typically accompanies, those awakenings. What's sort of your recipe or recommendations for someone that wants to overcome some of the overwhelm that they're experiencing, while simultaneously expanding their awareness and sort of calibrating their map of the world and reality?
It's heavy, and it feels heavy, and it will feel heavier and heavier if you keep your eyes fixed on the problems. And so it's like, okay, well, this dude's talking about some crazy machine in Japan, and I can't afford to go to Bavaria, and or that guy's talking about some weird semen retention. That seems too far out for me, right? So let's
these guys are me.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God. And it just gets people to, feel overwhelmed. I mean, this is obviously a biohacking show, so it's a little different of a demo, right?
Yeah.
But, it's like, let's just start with fixing that headache. Let's just start with like one ingredient that we might be able to swap out that's going to give us a little bit of edge. And then let's reinvest that refound energy into, kind of better outcomes, into, more lifestyle stuff, right? Like I get up every morning, I do Qigong, I lift weights in the middle of the day. Like I have a routine. But, it came from years of trial and error, and it came from realizing that, bad decisions don't make me better, right? And so I started stacking good decisions one at a time. And, I tested actually every 100 days. I go on what's called a gong. And right now I'm probably on day 60 of this one. It's got its thing. I have my Qigong, I've got my workouts, got my reading and all that. But then every time I finish a gong, and if I mess up, I have to start over. So I'm not in the habit of messing these things up anymore. Then it's like navigating, right? It's like, hey, if I want to get to that mountain peak over there, well, let's get to that hill over there, and then let's calibrate, let's get our bearings, and then let's figure it out. So, I never say things like, hey, I'm never going to drink, right? Because I will probably want to have a glass of champagne at my son's wedding, right? Like that's an insane, like never is a long time, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'll say, look, I'm not going to drink for 100 days, and let's see how I feel. 100 days later, you're like, damn, drinking is really not great for my body, right? And so then you recalibrate and find a new relationship with drinking, and in 100 days, you have created a new habit and realized that you could do fine without drinking. Right? Whether that's smoking for you, whether that's ejaculating for you, or whatever it is, these little 3 times a year sprints really help us develop new habits in a way that are meaningful. And then they allow us to reassess and say, look, you know what, I've done tons of things on gongs that I don't do anymore. Because I'm like, that was cool. I don't need to be doing that anymore. That's fine. That didn't really move the needle for me. Right? What I need right now is, more sleep. Right? And we're contemplating getting another puppy. Right. And so like, I'm literally weighing that against like my sleep scores going, man, does this guy need a puppy? Right. Puppies get up. Right. And so that means someone here, my kids sure as hell ain't going to get up. So that means, the buck stops here. So am I willing to compromise my sleep because the kids want another puppy?
What kind of puppy do you have right now?
So we have I have an 11-year-old red lab. I have a 9-month-old white lab, and we have this cute little male. So a boy and a girl, and now I have a cute little male white lab that's just like, take me home. And so we're like, oh God, do we need this in our life right now? And the kids beg for it, but don't let the inmates run the asylum, right? Like my wife and I have to make the decision based on kind of the overall health of the family. And will a puppy disrupt our sleep? 100%, right? That's called, having a kid, right? So, that fact that has to factor into your calculus is who are you going to be 30 days from now when you're like, low on sleep and you got the big thing at work, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. This, just to kind of make sure I understand this, these gongs you're talking about, and I think you said a 60-day gong.
100 days. 100 days.
I'm 60 days.
Yeah, I'm 60 days into this one.
Okay. All right. So it's a 100-day gong. And is it you pick one thing that you believe would be like the highest leverage or like the big domino in your life, and then you run a 100-day test and you have to make that behavioral modification for 100 days consecutively? Is that kind of how it works?
For beginners, yes. So what I'd like to tell people is start with one thing, because we're really good at breaking promises to ourselves. And every time we do that, we reinforce the I suck narrative, right? And that's not helpful. So if you're not good at that kind of stuff, I would start with one thing, whether it's, stretching for 15 minutes in the morning or doing, push-ups every day or quitting gluten, right? Whatever that one high leverage thing is, I would start with that. For me, I've been at this for a while. So I have, 5 parts. So I have my Qigong, my meditation, my workout, my cardio, and my reading that have to be done every day without fail, or I have to start over. And then I have my 30, 60, and 100-day goals, which is like, I want to track and see if, dude's getting better. What's your BMI? What is your resting heart rate? What's your, VO2 max? Depending on what you're testing, there's plenty of ways to objectively monitor those things, right? Am I getting, and some of them are a little more subjective, but are still, data points, which is, am I getting more quality time with my kids? Right?
I like it. So Qigong, meditation, workout, which includes like your strength training, cardio, and reading. Those are your big 5?
Those are my 5 for 40 more days. And then, we'll see. I mean,
nice.
I have a hard time kind of cutting any of those, because if you're not reading, your brain's not growing. If you're not meditating, you don't stand a chance in this world. So, I'll usually kind of interchange or kind of adjust them. But, I've been at this for 3 decades of gongs, right? Like, it's, this is what works for me. It doesn't mean that's what everyone else needs to do.
Right. For sure. Dope. I feel like there's a lot of, along with like, just kind of dovetailing off of that overwhelm conversation that we were having. Similarly, a lot of people are investigating their relationship with money and how they trade their time for money and how that relates to the purpose and meaning that they're able to experience in their life, I talked to a guy the other day on social media, and he was like, yeah, my job just told me I get to keep it, for another extended period of time, despite the fact that I didn't want to participate in certain medical experiments and yada, yada, yada. But it's got me rethinking, is this what I really want to be doing? And I think there's a lot of people that are, I kind of went through that in like late 2019. I was just working all the time. And then when this event sort of grabbed me by the lapels and shook the crap out of me, I realized I'm like, this isn't the life that I want. I don't want to spend all day in front of a computer and then take a break to work out and then get back to work and then take a break to eat and then get back to work and then go to sleep and then wash, rinse, repeat. Can we talk a little bit about that process of finding meaning and how someone who might currently be in a job that they hate or a job that they liked when they got it, but they're no longer aligned with, how do you go about developing a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, and living a life that feels more aligned with your soul's calling or with what, you might consider God's will for your life?
I think the narrative for that question has been usurped, because what we're talking about is the identity of a person in relation to what they do instead of who they are. And I think that the essence of that, and that's, it's great for capitalism, but I think the essence of that argument needs to boil back down to, doesn't matter what I'm doing. I mean, I could be scooping dog poop or running my companies or, skiing or whatever. my internal state has nothing really to do with what I'm doing and who I think I am, because all those are false narratives that make me try to feel better about the absolute chaos that I feel when I look forward into the world. And so how do I address the anxiety and the lack of meaning and the challenge that I face with this crazy world that I see? I would put it to you and your listeners that has nothing to do with what you do. And later what you do starts to kind of sync up with that because of the internal state that changes. But I think all the guns need to be focused on that retrospective looking inward to ask the better question of who am I? And if who am I has nothing to do with what I do, what I like to do, what my hobbies are, and I keep getting deeper and asking, well, who just asked that question? And who's the guy that is behind the question, then you start digging deeper into the true essence of who you are, which doesn't need a job title or an activity to define itself. And then you could be a guy, assembling paper clips and have the biggest smile on your face. And we've all heard of that guy or hopefully have met that guy, right? So the happiest people I've seen have been street beggars that are, lepers in India, right? And I'm just like, how the hell are you happy, right? And that's, I learned more on the streets of India than I ever learned in the ashrams, right? It's just unbelievable. Once you find that kind of nexus of happiness and that inner sun lights up and starts to glow and radiates from within, then you're just happy. Then you just, figure out what you want to do next. I've changed careers like 27 times. I just I don't know what the hell I do anymore. Right. But if I find that I'm not happy, then I have to sit on my cushion and analyze what it is that I'm feeling, go back to happiness before I start moving my feet.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever been accused of being an anti-leper? Just messing around.
It's in one of my books. I don't even remember which one, but there's a story about a leper that like rang my bell so hard that changed my perspective on all this like spiritual crap that's out there, and really kind of calibrated me to what's important. I have a huge affinity for lepers. They're my angels. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. What is you've mentioned angels a couple times. Like, what's your perspective and belief about angels and the role that they play in our lives?
Yeah, I think they're there. I've had a few near-death experiences. I've done a lot of astral travel. Like the people you think are gone are right there. So I think that, there's disembodied human energy. And I've also had a fair amount of experience with, whatever you want to call that energy, right? And whether it's an archetype assembled in my own consciousness to make me feel better about, my puny existence, or whether it's, Gabriel or Michael himself, you feel it, right? You feel it and it's undeniable. And so, will I know 100%? Maybe when I leave this body and I'm fluttering around with those guys, we'll see. But I've had visceral experiences with entities on the positive side. And just to be clear, I've also, a classically trained Daoist abbot, which means I had to learn how to do exorcisms and all sorts of stuff that's not fun. So I've dealt with all kinds of energies in my day. Exorcisms, I'd rather go to Disneyland and wait in 3-hour lines. There's a whole wild world of entities and consciousness and manipulation of consciousness out there 100%. That, again, drives me to beg our listeners to ask the better questions and find out who their eternal selves are, because the self you think you are is being leveraged, whether it's by a Toyota commercial, a politician, or, the app in your phone. Everyone's interested in manipulating your attention.
I'm a big believer now that a lot of the spirituality and like New Age movement also not only takes many people away from God, but it also could potentially open them up to some of these, whatever you want to call it, like entities that are not aligned with good and light and our creator, and have had some interesting experiences. But I want to be respectful of your time and kind of get ready to land this plane because I want to keep it under an hour. But you mentioned astral travel. Like if that was astral travel or lucid dreaming, I don't know if you've messed with that, but if someone wanted to explore that, like what would be your recommendations for them?
Do the spiritual work first. Start doing the 4-count breathing. Start figuring out, what it's going to take to observe your monkey mind and not be reactive to it. Because astral travel is something that is not a 1.0 skill. And I think a lot of beginners start to get trapped in trying to find meaning or meeting, entities that are going to be like, guides up there. And not all of them are friendly. And so until you have the discernment and the wherewithal to understand the difference, be careful, right? And to your point, and I think it's worth kind of, stepping into this for a second is, I've been around a lot of dude bro spirituality, right? Where, these dudes go do some, ayahuasca in the jungle and now they think they're God or, there's a lot of these.
That was part of what I think opened me up to some of these dark entities, to be honest. And we had to clear a bunch of that up.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of exorcism deal flow, and I know the guys that are doing it, right? There's some really bad characters out there. There's some really shady qigong masters that are just milking people for money, and there's a lot of entity exposure because people want the flashbang, spiritual experiences, and most of it's bullshit, right? Most of it is top-down control systems from people who aren't necessarily looking out for your best interest. And so, just find your own breath, find your own light. If you're, religious, read the Bible, read, some of the more kind of esoteric texts along those lines, but dig deep and find the answers in your heart. And we're involved. We do ketamine assisted therapy, and I'm part of a couple studies that are doing psilocybin and MDMA assisted therapies because it's amazing for trauma. But an unregulated, non-therapeutic drug shamanic exposure with someone who is not necessarily, qualified and or ethical, man, have I seen some fallout there. More often than not, women getting raped, guys getting raped, people getting abused. It's just, the story is endless. So, just know that the devil also exists so that you have to keep your eyes on the light and understand that a lot of the stuff out there that's trying to, get your attention is also trying to get you.
Totally. I was at a Chicago sweat lodge with one of my buddies on Saturday. We do like Turkish bath and they got like a 37-degree cold plunge pool and a dry Russian sauna. And he was like, "What do you think about ayahuasca?" He's like, "You've done it a number of times." And I'm like, I don't think I'll do it again. And he goes, he tells me this story. He was talking to a girl that did it. And she was like, "Oh, it was incredible. I saw the most beautiful entity I'd ever experienced. It was like this amazing snake and it was gorgeous." And he's like, I've read the Bible, a number of times. I try to stay in the word of God, and I'm listening to this and I'm like, that sounds a lot like the devil, like a beautiful serpent. And like, that's the energy that she's interacting with and encountering during medicine. And I'm like, yeah, I think there's a lot of other ways to have a spiritual awakening and like grow yourself rather than going to the jungle and drinking that medicine.
Arguably, I'll push back and say there's also an amazing amount of light and clarity that is also there. And I think that how do I say this? There's been a misinterpretation of the serpent. I mean, going back to Tantra, going back to the Caduceus, and going back to the serpents climbing the central channel. And I think, the early kind of church fathers were so wary of some of these advanced principles because they led to so much darkness that they just made it all taboo. So if you start going into, kind of higher levels of understanding of that stuff, the serpent crawls up your spine. The serpent is part of the DNA strands, and there's a whole language of communication.
Yeah. And
Jeremy Narby wrote a great book about that. But I think Timothy Leary it was McKenna or Leary said, when someone asked him about ayahuasca, he was like, "Man, that is not a Saturday night kind of drug. You need to read a good 3,000 to 5,000 books before you get into that stuff." Right? Yeah. Like I just have a lot of amateurs who are just like, "Oh, I don't like my stupid job. I'm going to go to the jungle and, get raped." Right? Like people just make some really bad decisions. They end up in some very dark alleys with some really shady characters that are administering spiritual healing. And I see the worst of it because I'm a priest and they come to me when they're all destroyed. Right. And so, I just want to caution our listeners that, there's just a lot of hyperbole and there's also a lot of shadow in that space. So just be careful, protect yourself, right? You know, if your mom doesn't think it's a good idea, maybe it's not, right? Like just watch yourself.
For sure. For sure. What would you consider to be like your must read books or the most powerful books that have positively impacted your life?
That's a loaded question. I really like a book called Meditations on the Tarot, written posthumously and anonymously. Later on, we found out the guy's name was Valentin Tomberg. Very deep journey into esoteric Christian Hermeticism. If you're Jewish, I like Adam and the Kabbalistic Tree. Daoist, I love, just the Wandering Daoist, that whole trilogy. I obviously love The Secret of the Golden Flower, the Cleary translation. The Dhammapada is just beautiful text. I like Don Miguel Ruiz. I like a lot of things, obviously, that are instrumental in helping people wake up. And, maybe your entree is the, Siddhartha or, The Alchemist, and a lot of kind of on-ramps are that way for people. But I think, the classic texts are great. I think there's a lot of really, cool new work that's come out. I think Harari's work is good, but I think Harari is kind of like, sounds dead inside, right? Like it's not, there's something missing there.
Yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of the kind of dude bro tech guys are all, trying to be Darth Vader, right? Like I'm not seeking immortality through devices and gadgets. I'm seeking it through my consciousness. Use other things to keep my body healthy. I will, but I'm not trying to drink like Guatemalan baby blood. Like I've seen.
I was just going to say they're pretty good as long as they're getting their regular IVs of baby blood.
Yeah, they're blood boys, right? Like I've seen it. I've been around the ultra rich. I've seen what some of these guys do.
So weird,
gross. It's parasitic.
It is. It's very parasitic. Favorite biohacks or tools that you utilize? Like, do you track your sleep? What are some things that have had like beyond the Qigong meditation workouts, cardio reading? Like, are there other biohacks or tools that you utilize for yourself? NAD drips. We talked about the plasmapheresis. What do you really like? Stem cells. What are you into?
Yeah, I'm into V cells. I'm into plasmapheresis. I'm into ozone exertion under ozone. I'm into power plates. I'm into, in terms of like the biometrics and understanding, I'm obviously, monitor your blood sugar and your heart rate variability. I still think is a really good indicator of a lot of things. I'm an old school neurofeedback guy. I studied with Barry Sturman back in the day. I've been around neurofeedback for a while. We're introducing this really powerful technique that's QEEG based, transcranial magnetic stimulation.
Nice.
Like
I've done that.
Yeah. So there's some really interesting stuff that's out there that is pretty profound and is working really well. I'm a fan of good old fashioned vitamin drips, but I'll tell you my favorite, which I didn't get last night, so I sound a little tired, is sleep. I'm a big fan of sleep quality.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we just had a storm and the kids woke up and stuff. So it was a rough night, but man, I can sleep off most anything. Right.
Yeah.
But what do you got to do to sleep? Sleep isn't something you do. So you have to be able to shut down the windows and fall asleep. You have to let go. And so that is a skill set that I think most people lack. Right. They try to do sleep. And so quality sleep happens when you learn to pop in the clutch and disengage, get out of gear.
Yeah, for sure. Last question, and then if we do a part 2 sometime, we can talk more about ejaculation and not tying it to orgasm. But again, I know you've got other stuff going on, as do I, but I'm really enjoying our conversation. What do you believe is God's plan for humanity?
No, man.
We hadn't done a light one.
Yeah.
Thought we'd done a light one.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you go to the classic kind of understanding of, the spiritual stuff, which is this is a spiritual school and we're supposed to, learn about our own divinity and, ascend and get off the earth school. I've kind of relegated myself to not worrying about that and just being as kind of a human, as good of a dad, as caring of a husband, and as, capable of a filmmaker as I can be in the time that I'm given. Because those big questions, they're kind of dizzying. And at the end of the day, it's so damn abstract, right? Sorry to use damn in the God answer here. But it's so abstract. And I think a lot of people kind of get stuck in the kind of philosophical meanderings of this instead of spending more time breathing to their navel and finding the kind of true source of their breath. And then you could see it. I mean, I don't want to deflect the question, because, you go into a deep meditation, you're viscerally aware of God's plan-ish as it's emanating and, flashing in front of you, and you see the beauty of all creation right in front of you. But I think the abstract questioning of that gets us into more and more kind of abstract paths away from the experiential reality that's afforded to us through these temples called our bodies. And I think the sooner we start cultivating our breath and observing our consciousness and learning who we truly are, the less we need to answer those questions and the more we smile.
Good answer. Good answer. Guys, if you've enjoyed this conversation, if you got value from some of the things that Pedram has shared, please share this with your friends, family members, people that you work with. Pedram, what would you like to leave our listeners with? You've got bepossible.com, the letter B and possible.com. If it's to go there and check stuff out, maybe you could explain a little bit more, like, who that's for and what's in it for them. You've touched on a lot of that, but how they can follow you and stay up to date with cool things that you're working on, all that fun stuff.
Cool. Yeah. bepossible.com. We've opened it up to have a free level. So, 95% of the material is just free. We, ad supported, because that's how, you keep the lights on. And then, just jump in and find what serves you. We have thousands of hours of new material coming in this year. Lots of new shows. I'm hosting a show called Vitality that we're starting to film next month. You find your way, and then you just kind of follow the breadcrumbs of, what interests you. My work at theurbanmonk.com, I have a lot of courses that are, I have a Tantric course, actually. I have a lot of courses that I've taught over the years, 8 books. If any of this resonates, just poke around and see. I'm on Instagram, all of it. I don't really do much on those things. I don't care for social media very much, but it's kind of a necessary place to be. But you can find me through the websites. You can find me through social. But more important than finding me is finding you, right? I think, people can listen to thousands of podcasts and still not know what to do. I really implore everyone who's listening to just get started on something, whether it's that 4-count breathing or something, today. And then tomorrow, do it again. And just build on that momentum, and you'll find that your life changes.
Awesome, brother. Thank you so much for your time and wisdom and energy. I appreciate it. I've loved our conversation, and love all the work that you're doing. Is that Tantra course on Be Possible, or is that on the urbanmonk.com?
I think we moved it on to Be Possible as well. I think that's like the masterclass tier, but I think it's there. I should know these things. It's definitely on the urbanmonk.com. I've been teaching Tantra courses for years. I've been very wary of it, because some people come in wanting, all the fireworks and, I want to be a supreme lover, and it's about finding yourself again. Yeah. It's about learning who you are through your connection to your immortality, and that, rises from the base of your spine. Right. So that's a whole other can of worms we can talk about later.
Awesome. Well, thank you, brother. Appreciate you. And loved our conversation.
Thank you. This has been fun.